in Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
It's literally too good.
Yeah.
How many times do you think we can listen to that before the close of play today? Well, that was arguably one of the most surreal moments in US presidential debate history. But who did actually ultimately win the TV bout between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris?
We're going to be joined by Tony Diver, our US editor who was at the debate in Philadelphia, to dissect all the gory details and to ask, has Trump now blown it?
And after Australian PM Anthony Albanese has called for a social media ban for under 16s, we'll be discussing the thorny issue of children and smartphones. Welcome to the Daily Tea with me, Camilla.
And with me, Tim Stanley.
So, Tim, you're tired because you stayed up throughout the night and watched this farrago play out before your very eyes.
I certainly didn't fall asleep during it.
No. I've sort of kind of caught up on it as much as I can. And I sort of came into the studio and said to you, it's sort of about between a wacko and a lightweight is the only way I can describe it.
Yeah. And it just confirmed prejudices that he's crazy and she's insufferable. I thought watching this, so let's remember the context. He debated Biden, and Biden did so badly that Biden dropped out of the race. And she was, of course, much better than Joe Biden. I think that because she was better, to begin with, he was better too. I actually thought Trump looked more disciplined and more focused, and he was pretty good on the economy is bad, it's very bad. It'll get much better when we're in. The price of milk, it's so high. And I thought he was going to stay at that level. And then suddenly we got, they're eating cats and dogs. They're eating the cats.
It's like, but also, don't you think that we've entered this parallel universe where Trey Parker and Matt Stone's Team America World Police has almost come to life? Like we've got a US presidential hopeful talking about people eating people's pets.
Yeah, but also if she was against anyone else, Camilla would have looked bad. All she had done was memorized a number of buzzwords which she repeated in random order. She would just say things like middle class, values. She just democracy. She just used words which someone clearly focus grouped and thought they sound nice. But against Trump, she did look very good. She was very good at goading him. She was good at pointing out his errors. She was also given a great deal of support by the ABC moderators, who fact-checked a lot of what he said. And after a while, as always happened with Trump debates, it felt like he was on the spot. But let's remember, he's done about 8 debates now in his presidential career. This happens every single time. You can't watch, you can't watch Death Wish 12 and be surprised at the content of Death Wish.
No.
Likewise, you can't watch Trump on his 8th debate and say, I'm really surprised they went with, they're eating cats and dogs. You can't be surprised by that.
On eating cats and dogs, just to explain, that is him repeating what appears to be a completely untrue story about Haitian immigrants supposedly eating people's pets in Ohio. No doubt there are now troops of journalists heading to Springfield.
I feel so sorry for
knocking on doors and going, can I just ask, I'm sorry to disturb you, but has an immigrant ever eaten one of your pets?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, what I also thought was interesting, considering that Harris has been accused of sort of not really being involved, concerned with, or vocal on foreign affairs, that she did find an Achilles heel.
Yeah.
And this was talking about Trump's relationship with both Vladimir Putin in Russia and Xi Jinping in China.
Yes.
He then kept on referring back to his relationship with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Her whole point was they just flatter you and they eat you for breakfast and they don't respect you. And as you say, his comeback was, but I'm very much admired by Viktor Orban. And we can hear a clip of that, I believe.
Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men. They call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president.
By the way, is there a slight lisp in that voice?
I don't know. Could you do the impression of him with the lisp? Could you say
that,
cats
I'd have
and
to
dogs?
go away and work on it. There's a touch of Bonnie Langford in there. But he This is so, of all the people in the world who you can point to and say, but I've got an endorsement, Viktor Orban, regardless of the controversy surrounding Orban, I mean, yes, he is indeed a strongman. Some say he's the most authoritarian leader in democratic Europe. But also, no one's heard of him.
No.
It's a strange
I know.
endorsement.
What's that statistic about half of Americans don't have passports? They won't know who this guy is from Adam.
And people have pointed out that just like mentioning the cats and dogs, mentioning Viktor Orban, he's mentioning things which are big on Twitter.
Yes.
These are debates among Elon and his mates.
Well, he's not big on Twitter, he's big on Truth Social, but I take your point.
Yeah.
He's big on the socials and therefore he's playing to that crowd.
Yes.
But that is not middle America.
And given that Kamala Harris's whole strategy is to paint the Republican ticket as weird, it does come across as a little bit weird to keep mentioning things people haven't heard of. And when they Google check it, they'll see it's possibly not true.
Isn't that quite a good attack line, though? I mean, she was definitely trying to get under his skin. She was trying to rile him.
Yes.
Should we listen to the comment she made about people leaving his rallies early?
Yes.
You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
I see. Why didn't he reply, "Have you forgotten that I nearly got shot at a rally"? Why didn't he hammer her on Joe Biden and say, "Where is Joe?" He did it a couple of times.
Yes.
He said, "The president doesn't even know he's president. He's in his bunker." He did do that a couple of times.
Yes.
But he didn't press these advantages nearly enough. And of course, she is smart, or the people who trained her are smart. They know that he is very sensitive. Everything with Trump is a size issue. It's all to do with the size of his crowds, the size of his hands. I've got huge hands. It's all to do with size. And they knew that if you do that, so this was in the middle of a debate about immigration, which is his strongest policy area, because it is perceived that Camilla was in charge of the border. She wasn't, but it's perceived that she was.
He built a wall,
and that she screwed it up. He's going to build yada yada yada. And so she was asked about immigration, and she did a classic pivot. Rather than answering about immigration, she talks about Trump's rallies, and then rather than Trump pivoting back and saying, "Never mind my rallies, what about the border?" Instead of doing that, he starts going on about, "My crowds are huge. People, hers are bust in. She has to have people bust in." And it's just
well, they both probably have people bust in. I mean, I don't think I've been to a political event where people haven't been bust in with placards. But you're so right. He's like a little child, isn't he? He rises to the bait.
Yes.
It's like, I remember this is how I behave with my older brothers. It's
Yeah.
like, I couldn't help myself. Just calm down,
And
baby.
it's predictable. It's Pavlov's dogs. Watching it, you knew he is going to jump at that. He is going to respond. And he did.
She also went for the jugular on abortion, which
Yes.
is her strong suit with Democrats and indeed particularly Democratic women. Let's
voters,
hear that little head-to-head.
And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban.
Right. He won't. And one won't be put before him. I mean, this is the thing you've got to... And that's what he said. And, of course, he then tried to throw it back by saying that the Democrats want to execute babies. What he meant by that is he's referring to partial birth abortion. And Trump finds himself in a complicated position here because what has he actually done in appointing people who got rid of Roe v. Wade? He's not banned abortion in America. He sent it back to the states, as he kept saying. And that means in some states they will have very conservative laws, in others they'll have very liberal laws. And wherever it has been tested by referendum, the voters prefer liberal laws. So America might actually, on balance, end up with a more liberal situation on abortion than it had pre-Roe v. Wade. But the problem is he finds himself having to defend what he did, but also say, but I don't actually want to ban abortion. Because we all know he doesn't.
No.
So he's actually trying to find a middle way here. In some regards, he's trying to present himself as the more moderate candidate. Because what he's saying is, I'm in favor of exceptions for abortion, but you Democrats, you want it right up until birth.
I mean, also, while there may be many people actually on the Democrat side who are uncomfortable with full-term abortions, let's be honest about it, sort of the language of execution. What she's very good at doing, Harris, is what I would say a sort of Drew Barrymore-style chat show pitch to the women of America, to sort of right-thinking women of America. It's sort of it's softer than Hillary Clinton. It's more sort of, you know, I'm the kind of woman who you could discuss your divorce with over a coffee, and this guy is a misogynistic maniac. Like, there was very emotive and emotional language. She's actually, I get the word salad thing. I've made that criticism of her myself. She is quite articulate. She is quite articulate when it comes to trying to convey the voice of women in America. And of course that's appealing because that is something he absolutely cannot do, ironically, even though he's got a pretty split gender balance of supporters.
Isn't it interesting? I think that she's better than Hillary Clinton at this.
Yes.
And I think part of that is to do with baggage. Until Biden stepped out, Trump was the change candidate. But now it's Kamala Harris. She's the change candidate because he is a throwback to, and this kept coming up, 2020, January the 6th, all those controversies of the past. And partly because she's been under the radar as vice president, because she didn't do a great deal, she now represents the fresh face. And you look at the two of them, and if you're coming down to voting on the basis of sheer psychological exhaustion, and I think we're all across the West exhausted by our domestic politics, you might look at those two and say, I'd actually prefer to hear her voice.
Should we speak to somebody next who was actually there?
Yes, rather than us. Someone who actually saw it firsthand.
Well, let's speak to the man who was inside the spin room. He was up close and personal, frankly, with both candidates. US Editor Tony Diver. Now, what was your verdict, Tony? Because, you know, the readers have come in, they're kind of split both ways. What did you think?
Well, I think it was pretty clear from watching the debate that Kamala Harris won. It was slightly unexpected, actually, how much she was able to rattle Donald Trump. And we've heard some of those clips, but her strategy was clearly to try and rile him up, to criticize him, say that not many people came to his rallies or that they got bored when they were there, to say that world leaders found him to be embarrassing and that they were mocking him. She was really pushing all of his buttons. She knew exactly what they were. She clearly watched the tapes from the previous debate, and it works. And once she started saying those things, he completely lost his train of thought. He started rambling about Haitian migrants eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio. There was some bizarre conspiracy theories came out. And I think if that was her strategy, it worked very well. I think she got away from the debate without really giving anything away. She didn't make any more policy commitments that she hadn't already made on the campaign trail. She didn't really give us a clearer idea of how she would try and achieve her economic aims, which is really the center of her campaign. But she won the debate by his failures, perhaps, rather than her own successes.
And her big orange opponent did come into the spin room, and the Telegraph asked him a question. Let's have a listen to that.
Mr. President, did you prepare enough for tonight?
Yeah, we had a great debate. That was our best debate ever. That was our best debate ever.
Tony, it's not normal, is it, for someone to come into the spin room after a debate?
Yeah, you can hear Trump there claiming that it was his best debate ever and he did brilliantly. I think the fact that he was even there talking to reporters after the debate tells you a very different story. It felt to me like he was in damage limitation mode. He knows that his presence in front of journalists is enough to carry the story, and he wanted the story to be about what he was saying there rather than about what happened on the debate stage. But I think from hearing what he said and those from his campaign around him in the spin room last night, it was quite clear that they realised it had not gone very well. and they were trying to find a way to argue that, in fact, it was all the moderator's fault and the biased broadcasters from ABC, and it was nothing to do with his own performance. I think, in truth, it was their man's performance that was the issue.
Do you think there's something in that? I know that when CNN hosted the debate, they were criticised for not stepping in and challenging Trump. This time, is there a case for saying ABC stepped in a bit too much to question Trump?
I think this is a really difficult balancing act for the broadcasters, actually, because if you're going to commit to stepping in and correcting candidates when they make false claims, then you have to be sure that you can step in every time there is a false claim. You have to be sure you've got all that information to hand and you can jump in like that. Clearly, the presenters last night, the moderators, were prepared for some of the stuff that Trump said, because a lot of the things that he was claiming are things that he's claimed before, and they jumped straight in. There were also some misleading stuff that was said by Kamala Harris. She claimed to have created 800,000 jobs, which is not quite correct. But it's certainly true that they jumped in a lot more on Trump than they did on her. Now, that's probably because he was making a lot more false claims than she was. But it puts the broadcaster in a difficult position because it does allow his campaign to say, well, look, if it was 3-on-1, is what they say. Look how often they were interrupting him.
Tony, you got closer to him than we probably ever will. How did he seem? What's he like up close? Was he rattled?
Yeah, he seemed quite frustrated, I would say. I mean, we know that Trump loves media attention, and it really was a scrum. I mean, as Trump walked into this huge hall where we were all sat watching the debate, down one end there was this spin room, which is kind of like a red carpet setup that you would have outside a film premiere. And as he walked into the room, reporters were literally running from one side of the hall to the other to try and get into this huge scrum that surrounded him. I got into that scrum and I was sort of had my microphone out and I was trying to get as close as I could. I managed to get some of it on film. But yes, he seemed a bit frustrated, and he couldn't convincingly claim to have won, I don't think. Must have been quite difficult to appear in front of that number of journalists. And the other interesting thing that happened last night, of course, is that straight after the debate, Taylor Swift endorsed Kamala Harris in an Instagram post. And he was asked about that as well. Someone said to him about 5 minutes after it happened, what did you make of Taylor Swift's endorsement? And he just said, I don't know.
Tony, you're well placed to give a view on this. Kamala Harris had an attack line in which she invited people to attend a Trump rally because she said you'll find them strange and introspective and boring, and that people actually walk away exasperated and bored by them. You've attended a lot of Trump rallies. Is that your experience?
Yeah, that does happen. I mean, they go on for a very, very long time. Trump can speak for hours in these rallies. They're not like conventional political events, and the cut version that you see on TV is not normally representative of what actually happens. They are long, they are rambling, and people do sometimes get up and leave. Perhaps they've got other things to be doing. It's not true that by the end of Trump rallies, there's no one in the crowd and no one's interested in listening to him. He does have this huge cult following, and people will hang there all day, every day. People will turn up 5 hours early and stand there in the boiling heat to listen to Trump speak. So it's not true that no one really cares about him. But yeah, I mean, there are some stragglers who leave his rallies after he's been going for an hour or so. And I think, frankly, having watched him, that's quite understandable.
Do you think this debate has moved the dial, Tony, and will there be another one?
Well, two quite difficult questions. On the first one, I would say there is only about 7% of people in the swing states, the states that really matter, who haven't made up their minds yet about what's going to happen in this election. So really, we're talking about the number of voters that Trump and Harris are fighting over is very small. Even within those 7 swing states, there are only about 40 counties across the whole of the US where the result will really matter, where it's genuinely possible that it could go either way. And the kind of all or nothing system that the Electoral College works on means that you win one vote more than the other candidate, and that might give you all of the delegates. So without getting into the complexity of the whole thing, we're talking about 50,000 people in a country of 350 million, which is going to decide this result. Those are the people that Trump and Harris were trying to talk to last night. So the question is, does what happened really change their minds? Does that address their concerns? Well, I think probably to some extent it does. Among undecided voters, people who really haven't made up their minds either way, there is a concern that Harris is fairly inexperienced. She doesn't have a huge amount of exposure. People haven't seen her speak as much. They certainly haven't seen her be tested. I mean, she's only done one interview since she took over on this ticket. So I think seeing her deliver a confident performance, taking on Donald Trump and winning, will have helped her a lot in those states. And those people may also have concerns about Donald Trump's kind of slightly erratic performance sometimes, and I don't think his performance will have helps them vote for him.
Another debate, though, Tony?
On another debate, a Harris campaign won one, obviously. Trump last night said that he would think about it. He said that she'd lost, which is why she wanted another one. But realistically, I don't think he'll do it.
Tony, I know you're about to catch a train from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us.
Tim, as Tony referenced there, Taylor Swift has come out in favour of Kamala Harris.
Yep.
No great surprise there, I've got to be honest. Are you a Swiftie?
I'm not, no. I couldn't name a single song she's sung. But obviously, I follow her politics very closely. And she says, I'm joking. She says on Instagram, quote, "I am voting for @Kamala Harris because she fights for the rights and causes I believe need a warrior to champion them." And she signed off, this is quite funny, as childless cat lady,
Yes.
a reference to comments made by Trump's running mate J.D. Vance about how America is being destroyed by women who have no kids and got lots of cats.
I know. I mean, I've got one cat. Maybe I'm a cat lady. I'm
you're
not childless.
You're
But
not, well, I'm a
it's-
childless dog man.
Yeah.
I don't.
How weird. That is an attack line.
Is it
That's
funny
because
how,
men rule the
It's
world.
funny how voting demographics have gone from CE voters or A voters or B voters to childless cat ladies versus lonely dog men.
Now, being a lonely dog man, I'm wondering if you have heard of these people, because they have also endorsed Kamala Harris. So, pop girlies Ariana Grande. Heard of her?
Yeah, no, I have heard of her, yes.
Yes, good.
I don't know who she is, but I've heard of the name.
All right.
Yeah.
Olivia Rodrigo.
Nope.
British pop star Charlie XCX.
Are you sure that's not a license plate that someone's reading out there?
No, it's like I'm giving you a psych test.
And Ariana Grande sounds like a place in Brazil or something.
know.
You could be making these all up.
No. These are actual people, Tim. Get down with the kids, please. Might need to give you a session with my teenage children just to bring you up to speed with some of these stars. But does it make a difference? Do we think that celebrity endorsements, and bearing in mind Taylor Swift has got 500 million social media followers.
Yeah.
I mean, which is crazy in itself. Does what Taylor Swift say encourage people to vote in one direction or t'other?
See, I think the interesting question is, do we still have singers who appeal to everyone regardless of their politics and therefore can move people's votes? So if you go back in the past, there were characters like that in America, like Elvis, right? Or Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Or Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, at one time a Democrat, later on a Republican. Loretta Lynn, the country hero. I was a coal miner's daughter. She was a close friend of the Bush family.
Yes.
And used to travel around with the Bushes campaigning for them. What I find interesting is now Hollywood and singers seem to me to be just 100% Democrat.
Yeah.
And I suspect are listened to by Democrats. So does Taylor Swift have Republican voting fans? Or is she herself singing to the demographic who would vote for Kamala anyway?
And how do Republican voting fans then react to that? Do they decide to themselves, right, that's it, I'm no longer listening to one of her albums?
Yeah.
The Dixie Chicks, do you remember them?
I certainly do. This subject of music, I don't care about the music, but I do care about the politics of music. And after the Iraq War, they visited London and they denounced the Iraq War and George Bush on stage. And it damaged their career.
Yeah,
because
they got cancelled. They were an early example of cancellation in 2003.
And they removed the Dixie from their name because they no longer wanted to be associated with Southern conservatism. And a lot of stars, including Taylor, have avoided campaigning politics and avoided controversial politics because of that.
I've got an idea, actually. Got a little list of pop stars and their endorsements. Who do you think Elton John supported in the last election? Multi-millionaire Elton John.
Yeah, of course. He probably endorsed the people who will be draining every bit of tax from his boss person.
He supported
possible.
Labour.
Yes.
So he's not getting his winter fuel allowance.
Yes.
2010, Gary Barlow
Now,
from Take
I
That.
remember that was a Tory endorsement.
Yes, it was. And he was
Yes.
ridiculed for it. And somebody went up to him at some kind of David Cameron launch campaign and said, who will you be voting for? And he said, I would not be here if I wasn't voting for the Tories, which was brave from Barlow. What about Phil Collins? What did he say in 1997 with the spectre of Tony Blair?
But this is a famous one because he said, I will leave the country if Labour wins. And of course, that came back to haunt him because it was later, who was it? It was Noel Gallagher in 2005 said, vote Labour. If you don't and the Tories get in, Phil is threatening to come back, which is very funny.
That's a bit harsh, actually, because I quite liked Phil in Genesis back in the day. Okay, this is a good one. Who did the former Spice Girl, Geri Halliwell, once describe as the original Spice Girl?
Well, no, I'm old enough to remember this happening. It's Maggie.
It's
yes.
Maggie. I mean, don't forget as well, the Spice Girls used to love cozying up to royalty.
Yes.
All of them. I mean, Geri Halliwell was from my neck of the woods, Watford, posh. Her dad drove a Rolls Royce. I mean, these were probably, by the way, whisper it, Tory voters.
Yeah, yeah. But again, back in the day, a singer, including in Britain, could casually make an endorsement in an election, and I don't think it would affect their public image. Lulu campaigned for the Tories,
Yes.
right? She was a big Tory. I don't think of Lulu, the milk snatcher, the coal miner's enemy.
No.
But nowadays, if a singer comes out and endorses a party, it comes to define them and their brand.
I know. I'd just avoid the subject, wouldn't you?
I would, but why shouldn't you be able to casually say, oh yeah, I'm voting for X, and it shouldn't affect your ability to sell songs?
God, we'll do a whole podcast when a very popular and down with the kids Gen Zer does support Trump. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, but there are plenty of artists who have done that, right? Just I don't know them and I can't name them.
Yeah, they've just done it in private very, very, very quietly.
But the interesting one is who is going to support whoever wins the coming Tory leadership race.
Well, indeed. Who will Badenoch or Jenrick or Cleverly or
Yes.
Tugendhat get to back them up?
Who's going to jump on the Rob Jenrick bandwagon?
Could we even begin to guess?
Milli Vanilli, is he still around?
I know they were discredited, weren't they, for plagiarism?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just imagine if we get sort of One Direction. Yeah, I'm all for Kemi.
Harry Styles.
Harry Styles
yes.
backs Kemi. It could happen, and we will cover it on the Daily Tea.
Coming up, Australia's Prime Minister has proposed a minimum age for children to use social media. Now, is this a good idea or just more nanny state meddling? We will give our verdicts next.
Throw another journo on the Barbie, mate, because we are going to discuss Anthony Albanese, who is the Australian Prime Minister for Labour. He is a lefty, I've got to point that out, suggesting that social media should be banned for under 16s. Let's have a listen.
This one is for the mums and dads. I know you're worried about the impact social media can have on young children, and so am I. That's why we'll introduce legislation this year for a minimum age for social media. I want kids to have a childhood. I want them off their devices and onto the footy field and onto the netball courts. I want them to have real experiences with real people. Together, we can get this done.
Is he for real? I've never heard Albanese's voice before. That really took me by surprise.
There's slight shades, isn't there, of Alf from Home and Away. You flaming glar. Do you know what I mean?
It's not the Australianness of it. It's that he just sounds half asleep.
He is a bit. Well, he's older.
He's
I don't
older,
know how old
right.
he is, but you know, he's an elder statesman. Should we put it that way?
Yeah. Okay.
Look,
okay,
he's there for Labour, so he's obviously interested in banning things.
Yes.
We've had this discussion, ironically, with the Tories who like banning things too. What's happened to politics? Everyone wants to ban everything. It's a compelling argument, though, isn't it, to say we should have kids back on the footy field? I mean, we should have them back on the footy field. Could they not do both?
Yeah.
I mean, this is you earlier described yourself as childless dog man.
Yeah.
I am.
Therefore, I have very strong opinions on how other people raise their children.
Yes. I bet you're really you know what you're doing in a parent. Why on earth are they letting their children run riot?
Yeah. I think we should. So just to be clear, currently, if you do sign up to these platforms, you do have to say how old you are, and it's typically around 13.
That's correct.
But crucially, all you have to do is just say what the date of your birth is,
Yes.
so you don't have to prove
Oh, no,
it.
you can lie. And look, by the way, the kids absolutely circumvent any restrictions
Of course
you ever
they
put.
do.
I mean, my 15-year-old recently revealed to me, oh, you know, when you did screen time and everything, I just like literally just went on your phone when you weren't looking, changed the password, did whatever I liked.
I
But
wouldn't
now,
know how to do that.
I know. Well, to be fair, I had a child saying to me only this morning, what's my screen time password? I put
Right.
in a couple and then I realised I'd completely forgotten it. If anyone knows how to change a screen time password you've forgotten, please do get in touch. It's thedailytea@telegraph.co.uk. Just to go over this policy, though, the Australian government has said the minimum age will likely be between 14 and 16. As you say, Tim, currently 13, but by the way, there are plenty of 10 and 11-year-olds, perhaps even younger, on social media sites. They've yet to make clear how the policy will work, but said they will trial age verification technology before banning children from opening social media accounts later this year. 4 in 10 of the 16 to 24-year-olds in the UK that own a smartphone, and that's 98% of them, 98%? Wow. Worry that they spend too much time on social media. From personal experience, this is a bloody nightmare for parents because I don't want my teenage children to be the kids that I went to school with that didn't have a telly and therefore were marginalised and appeared a bit odd and completely out of touch.
Yeah.
I do want my children to know who Taylor Swift, Charlie XCX, Ariana Grande and Olivia Rodrigo are. I don't want them to be socially isolated. What I try and do, I tried the screen time and the blocking and the restrictions and all the rest of it. And then I thought, first of all, my kids are really sporty because they love the great outdoors. So that balances up some of the online time. And then I tried to have pretty honest conversations with them about what are you doing? What are you looking at? Isn't this mind-numbingly dull? What is this nonsense? It was more an argument not about online harm, but just are there better things you could be doing with your time? And eventually, once we all came in, had a conversation about all this, my oldest child, who's now 15, voluntarily came off TikTok, put restrictions on Instagram, because you can, anyone listening to this knows, you can get into Instagram Reels and lose hours of your life.
Right.
Doom scrolling through nothing. She then did this speech for her English GCSE where she looked up some research. The thing about the way that these websites appeal to kids is because it's never ending endorphin rushes. It's a bit like vaping versus cigarettes. You have a cigarette, it ends, you move on. You go and watch a TV
And it's contextual.
It's contextual. You go and watch a TV program, it ends, you move on. Doom scrolling is never ending, and every time you see a video, you get a little endorphin high. Then, by comparison, doing anything that requires any concentration at all in comparison to this tangential exercise of video after video after video, literally sitting down and reading a book feels like sort of, you know, splitting the atom. It's that hard.
Yeah.
So we just try and balance things out. But banning, no, I'm not for banning. I'm sorry, banning is ridiculous. We need parental responsibility, and we need the tech giants to stop making this the online equivalent of crack. They should take off any harmful footage like, anorexia inspiration. I can't even believe I'm saying that this stuff is on there for teenage consumption. Suicide inspiration. Take some responsibility, all of you tech giants who are making millions and billions out of our kids, but also parents, I'm sorry, you've got to take back control.
I agree with you in principle that it should be up to people to show individual responsibility and to parent their kids properly. But listening to you, Camilla, I can tell you are a good and an engaged mother.
Well,
and isn't the problem
sometimes
not people like you, but the problem is the many, many parents out there who are not good and engaged or strong or who can't control their kids.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting we finally reached this point where we're recognizing how damaging social media actually is. If you look at the work of people like Jonathan Haidt, who argues that there is a link between the sudden spike in mental ill health, even suicidal tendencies in the 2010s, he argues there is an obvious link between that and the expansion of smartphones and social media. I suspect we'll also eventually prove a link between that and the rise of non-working as well, the growth of mental health. A lot of people not working nowadays is not physical ill health, it's mental ill health. So it's destroying individuals, it's destroying our society, it's of great cost to us. And unfortunately, there are many individuals out there who cannot exert self-will or who will not parent their kids properly. Therefore, if this stuff is as bad as they say it is, then it makes sense at the very least to regulate it for kids. And therefore, I would support a ban like this because I think this is the only way of sending a signal. It's just like putting an age limit on smoking. If you knew there was a drug out there, if no one had yet banned ecstasy and you knew it was out there, you couldn't just say to parents, look, just make sure your kids don't take ecstasy, all right? You'd have to ban it because it's that bad and it's that much of a risk to people.
I'm listening to you and I do agree with what you're saying, but then you have really good parents who suffer tragedies, like if you think about Molly Russell's dad. You know, he believes very strongly, and I think has been vindicated by the evidence, that his daughter died because of what she was seeing online. And that's not a parenting issue. That is absolutely in the hands of tech giants, exposing our children to online harm that is completely unacceptable and beyond the pale.
Yes,
I agree with you, like anything in moderation, right? I did an experiment with my kids. I did it with this morning. I took away their smartphones for a week and gave them brick phones.
Right.
They enjoyed it. I mean, if I wasn't in this industry, I would not be on social media at all.
No, of course
What's
not.
the benefit?
Why would I be?
I know. It's just, I mean, I try and self-promote on it. I enjoy being hated on it. I mean,
Yes.
great.
But I can say I also hate technology, and I'm absolutely serious about that. It has rewired our brains and the way we function as human beings. You mentioned the television. I like the days when television there's only something interesting on it between 8 and 10. So you watched it from 8 till 10, and then you turned it off because then there was the test card. So you went to bed and read a book until you fell
Yes.
asleep, or you smoked until you fell asleep, or whatever people used to do. Nowadays, I find I can watch TV all day, anywhere, and I do,
Yes.
until I exert self-will and
Yes.
control over it. It's destroying me. I
Yes.
prefer the pre-internet world in which there was less going on, it was less stimulating, and I had to entertain myself.
The kids said, we wish we grew up in the 80s and 90s
Yeah.
before phones. And I was like, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Do you know what, to bring this full circle, saying about the eldest circumventing all of the restrictions I'd put on, she's been the one saying to me with my youngest, who's 11, do not give her a smartphone. So we
Interesting.
haven't.
Yeah.
And she said, and we're actually, thankfully the eldest listened to this, but the youngest doesn't. So basically been lying to her. And she keeps on saying, when did they get their mobile phones? And I'm like, I think it was year 9. And she's going along with it, and that seems to be working. And I've just decided, she's really crafty, and it's like in our day, taking away what do you call it? It's like a kid sitting there quite happily with an Airfix model doing something really nice, and then you stick them in front of the TV and they lose interest in the great thing that they were doing to do something inferior.
Yes.
And it's the same with my youngest. She loves arts and crafts. As soon as we give her a smartphone, she'll never make anything again.
No, I know.
And that's the worry. So it's a tricky one. You've actually handled the whole, I don't have kids, but I'd like to give my parenting expertise thing. You've done that quite well, actually.
I
Tim.
believe very strong. Someday I'm going to write a book about how people should raise their kids the way I've raised my dog. And I will get so much angry mail, but I don't care. I believe the same principles
What are the rules
apply.
of the Stanley dog
Don't
rearing?
let them sleep on your bed.
Yes.
They've got to wait patiently for their food.
Yeah, they've got to eat what they've given.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they can't use smartphones because they've just got really small fingers.
But things like stimulation, discipline,
Yep.
timing, I'm in charge.
Spend some time outdoors.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
and walk the
Exercise.
parks of England.
Yes.
Shall we listen? Let's have a look at what you think about this. Chris Riding, best of luck enforcing this policy. Most kids will soon find a way around any digital restrictions, assuming they don't already know. Many kids could easily teach adults how the digital age works. Agree with that?
Should I? Yeah. Silin says it should be made illegal for children under the age of 16 to even own a smartphone, just like similar laws on smoking and buying alcohol, which are only allowed at certain age thresholds. I agree.
Buck Rogers, probably not his real name. Governments shouldn't be banning anything. It should be down to parents to realise social media's effect and implement a ban themselves. Easier said than done there, Buck.
And Ben Salowski says it's up to the parents to decide not to buy smartphone devices. We don't need more nanny state.
Yeah, Ben, newsflash. Teenagers can go and buy their own smartphones and keep them secret from their parents, which could be even more problematic.
And
but
perhaps what we all need is a nanny.
an actual nanny,
Yeah.
as opposed to a nanny
We
state.
don't want the state to do it. Maybe we should bring back nannies.
Well, we have nannies. What does that mean?
It's a private enterprise solution, isn't it? Rather than relying on the state to tell us what to do. Just
So instead of
give
paying...
everyone a Rees-Mogg nanny.
Oh, wow. The trouble is they cost quite a lot of money, Tim.
They do, unfortunately.
Yeah, and smartphones are cheaper. Tim, that's us done for another day. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to do our private school special on Friday. We, again, are shouting out to you for your stories. So have you been affected by VAT being slapped on school fees? Are you having to move your children? Are you in the state sector and being affected because you've got a load of private school pupils coming into the classroom and filling up all the desks? Get in touch. The Daily Tea at telegraph.co.uk on email or on our socials at Daily Tea Podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m.
Bye-bye.